Hi and welcome back to Backwards Compatible. This video is part 3 of the Hero's Journey series where we explore the meaning and the real-life application of the universal storytelling pattern described by Joseph Campbell. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notifications button if you are enjoying my videos and let me know you're out there by leaving a small comment. While last week we discussed the call to adventure and how it can inform your career and life choices, the focus of this video is the road of trials. That is the many tests and challenges that the hero has to face in his or her adventure. The next video will focus on the culmination point in the story where the hero defeats the villain or accomplishes an almost impossible task. But the road of trials is what precedes this ultimate fight or an internal struggle, and it is what prepares the hero for the transformative experience of death and abyss. So, I think we can all agree that what makes most films so enjoyable is that the main hero overcomes challenges and trials while we as viewers, we can enjoy the emotional surge that comes with winning a series of small victories, and we do not have to undergo any of the suffering that comes with actually facing them. Most films focus heavily on the road of trials, that is the stage of the hero's journey where the main character undergoes transformative difficulties, forms alliances, and sometimes makes enemies as he or she is tested by fate before facing his or her greatest obstacle. So in this video we are going to take a closer look at why adversity and tests are a necessary part of becoming a hero. We will flash out the recurring theme in every story, namely that the protagonist needs his opponents and enemies to reach his full potential and to discover part of himself that he was not aware of. We will see why adversity is a prerequisite for learning and growing, and we will examine imaginary characters and real people who recount the road of trials. Stay tuned if you want to understand how to turn obstacles into opportunities and why the efforts you make pay off in the long run. So just to recap on the Monomyth or on the hero's journey, the road of trials occurs in the supernatural domain of the story circle. This means that the hero has heard the call to adventure, accepted it, and reluctantly took the step into the unknown. You can interpret the unknown as whatever is scary and unclear, what you consider risky and vague or even menacing. It's like when the business people complain of uncertainty. Nothing is predictable and anything can happen. What is considered the ordinary domain in any particular film and what therefore is considered supernatural domain depends on the specific story. As a general rule, in any film, the first 10 minutes are devoted to setting the stage, so showing the usual, normal, typical day-to-day life of the protagonist, before then moving on to the real adventure. Essentially, the contrast between the two environments communicates to the viewer that there is also one more important change going on, and that is the change in the emotional and life state of the protagonist. Often, you will see that the crossing into the unknown, the beginning of the road of trials, is quite pronounced. Some sort of physical border is reached and the hero takes a leap of faith. So first thing first, what is the purpose of the road of trials in a story circle? This stage of the hero's journey represents the tests that the hero is faced with. He needs to prove himself, and in the process of proving himself, he will need to change and therefore become a new person. To say he's a new person does not fully explain the process of the actual change. The tests allow the hero to discover who he already is but has not yet recognized. Part of this stage of the journey is the need to find a mentor or an ally or to build new relationships, to learn from others, to accept own faults, and to become more open-minded, to see opportunities where previously the hero saw difficulties. There are only 3 key features of the road of trials that should be noted here. Firstly, the challenges are of increasing difficulty. Initially, the adventure does not require life and death decisions to be made, but as the hero progresses through his journey, the stakes are higher and higher. This is because the last challenge will be the one where the hero has to accomplish an almost impossible task while reconciling a deep inner conflict. There are Therefore, this series of tests builds up to the point of culmination in the story circle. Secondly, often but not all the time, the supernatural domain is dominated by a villain or a shadow that the hero will have to defeat. This feature reflects the Jungian idea of the unconscious perpetuating the suffering and the pain that the hero undergoes. The road of trials tends to be quite adventurous and light-hearted, but inevitably the last challenge will require full psychological and mindset transformation of the hero. Importantly, in films where the road of trials is poorly presented, this has very negative effects on the engagement with the audience. Ideally, each test should allow the hero to overcome an internal struggle. For example, if he is full of fear, the test should allow him to see himself as more courageous, but also an external obstacle, such as winning a fight with an enemy. Finally, the road of trials serves a purpose that may not be immediately apparent but is communicated by actions in the film or a book rather than words. The hero honestly needs those tests because he is not adjusted to the supernatural domain. He does not understand the principles that govern the unknown, and the tests will sort of bring him into alignment with the unknown to some extent. As I stated, the tests often require the hero to show courage and wit and the ability to see others for who they really are, and these are sort of transferable skills that matter in every environment. Without the road of trials, the hero would face the ultimate monster unprepared and would have no chance to win at all. So please comment below and tell me what you think is the best adventure film that you have seen so far that illustrates the many tests and trials that the main character has to go through. I think recently there has been an abundance of productions, but my top choice would be Jumanji, because the road of trials seems to be quite perfectly represented for each of the main characters in both films. So with that said and done, we know what is the road of trials, we know what are the main features of the road of trials. Let's look at some examples from the popular culture. For simplicity, we will use animated films because I like them and they tend to show the stages of the hero's journey in a clear and easily identifiable manner. In Inside Out, joy and sadness, emotions represented as animated characters, embark on a journey to retrieve a core memory of Riley, the person in whose head they reside. The final discovery for Joy will be that there is a place and purpose for Riley to experience sadness and all emotions, even those which are not positive. The road of trials in this case is unusual in that it plays out in a universe that serves as a metaphor for the human psyche anyway. Joy has to find a way back to the headquarters. She befriends Bing Bong, Riley's imaginary friend, and she has to let him go. She has to leave him behind to be forgotten. In the course of the film, Joy befriends Sadness and she learns to appreciate Sadness, who helps her to navigate the imagination land and the sleep production set. Both Joy and Sadness will work together to wake Riley up and to prevent her from escaping back to her hometown. The road of trial involves tests of courage, resourcefulness, and seeing others for who they really are. Onward is a story that focuses on two brothers whose father has died many years ago. As a result of a lucky magical spell their father left behind, the two sons may be able to have their last day with him. But something goes wrong, and the body of the father comes back but without the head. To see him fully for the last time, they must retrieve a Phoenix gem. On the journey to obtain the gem, Ian and Barley will work together, form a workable and effective friendship. In the road of trials, they will befriend one another, they will find help from a dangerous manticore, they will escape and evade police, learn magical spells, escape a gang of pixies with anger management issues, and defeat the dragon, the ultimate impossible task. In Zootopia, an aspiring police officer, Judy Hopps, deals with prejudice against small and cute animals who wish to enter professions dominated by predators. To solve a series of murders in the city, she has to prove herself to a squad of skeptical police officers. She has to befriend a fox, who also happens to be a petty criminal. She then learns to outsmart her opponents, and most importantly, she learns to recognize that not all cute animals are harmless. Some of them are wolf in the sheep's clothing, even if they don't look it. In Seoul, Jo, a jazz teacher, accidentally ends up in the grade before instead of the grade after, following an accident in which he almost dies. Then he decides to find a way back to Earth to achieve his dream of becoming a professional musician. In the process, he finds help from 22, a reluctant soul who does not want to be born and wants to stay in the grade before forever. To finally have his shot at being a musician, Jo will need help from 22, but he will also help her discover her spark, her purpose. He will become trapped in the body of a cat as a result of a freak accident, which will lead him to finally confront his mother. Moreover, he will attempt to evade a heavenly accountant looking for his missing soul, and ultimately he will give up his Earth past so that 22 can have her chance at life. In Brave, after Merida accidentally transforms her mother into a bear because she does not wish to be married or controlled, she only has 24 hours to mend the strained relationship or lose her mother forever. Merida will have to protect her mother from hunters, and she will have to cover their tracks, while also hoping to find some food for both of them. She will find new potential ways of reversing the curse, and she will see herself from a new perspective. Merida and her mother travel together to an abandoned ruined castle to learn of the fate of a long-forgotten prince who also wished to change his fate, but failed. Merida will attempt to mend the tapestry that represents the relationship with her mother, and ultimately she will save her family from the curse she brought upon them in the first place. As you can probably already see, there are common themes in the Road of Trials, even if it is shown in a less magical universe than that of Disney or Pixar movies. Firstly, once the hero embarks on his adventure, obstacles and difficulties are inevitable. This has been referred to in The Hero with 1,000 Faces, written by Joseph Campbell, as initiation through trials. Campbell, who first identified the hero's journey in its current circular form, wrote the following, quote, "The original departure into the land of trials represented only the beginning of a long and perilous path of initiatory conquests and moments of illumination. Dragons have now to be slain, and surprising barriers passed again and again." End quote. Basically, Joseph Campbell took the view that a person cannot reflect on themselves until such time as they are able to use something as a mirror to finally look at themselves. The hero's journey provides a structure for such reflection, and Road of Trials offers the initial glances of the person into the unconscious self. The challenges are therefore opportunities to see yourself for who you really are and to accept the reality of your being in its full form. Secondly, the message of the Road of Trials is that what matters is how the hero deals with the challenges. There is a hidden door of opportunity waiting for the hero to discover if his eyes are fully open. Finally, the hero really does need the Road of Trials. It is an essential part of becoming a more sophisticated, more mature and proficient version of himself. It brings the hero closer to a better understanding of who he truly is. As promised at the beginning, we will now bring the Road of Trials into the contentious claim that all humans really need adversity. Andrew Huberman is a neuroscience professor at the University of Stanford. The focus of his research and his lab is on brain plasticity and function, and his team uses virtual reality studies to examine threat response. In addition to focusing on hypnosis, stress, and learning, he recently went on an interview circle where he discussed the findings as relating to facing negative experiences and replacing negativity with basic positive thoughts in order to stimulate dopamine release. He said, quote, "How can I modify my brain? You modify it by placing yourself into discomfort and using that as a propeller to move you into action." Huberman encourages us to see stress and agitation as a tool so that we can push ourselves into movement, into action, so that these negative states can motivate us. Instead of excessively quieting the stress and negative emotion, he thinks that we should take the negative or even the positive emotion and convert it into taking action. The takeaway here appears to be that for you to maintain motivation and happiness, you must learn to control yourself in face of challenges by first dealing with them and being grateful for small obstacles rather than pushing yourself towards excessively large goals from the start.
There are really three responses to fear. You can pause, you can freeze essentially, you can retreat, you can back up, or you can go forward. And there's a single hub of neurons in the midbrain. It's actually not the midbrain, but it's in the middle of the thalamus, which is a forebrain structure. Depending on which neurons are active there's a much higher probability that a mouse, or it turns out, or a human will advance in the face of fear, or will pause, or will retreat. But what's interesting is that it turns out that the lowest level of stress or autonomic arousal is actually associated with the pausing and freezing response. And what was interesting to us is that the highest level of autonomic arousal was associated with the forward movement toward the threat. So in your case, jumping out of the plane. When one safely and adaptively, meaning you survive, moves through a threat or toward a threat, it's rewarded as a positive experience. And so the key, it actually maps very well to cognitive behavioral therapy and a lot of the existing treatments for trauma, is that you have to confront the thing that makes.
You may be wondering how neuroscience is at all related to the hero's journey, but as you have probably guessed by now, the road of trials and the path to controlling your internal reward system appear to be describing the same phenomenon, one from biological perspective and one from socio-cultural. The road of trials describes the many tests of the hero during which he must learn to deal with adversity and to overcome his own limitations. Obstacles are needed for the hero to become exposed to the stress and the fear that will actually trigger the learning process, as long as the hero can voluntarily face them. The road of trials can therefore inform also our attitude in face of difficulties and illustrate the correct approach to overwhelming problems. So, to bring this all back into reality and the practical application of the hero's journey, we will now examine 2 real-life case studies of people who really demonstrated that there is a preferred attitude or mindset to deal with challenges. And that preferred way is to seek opportunities hidden within difficulties, to be grateful for small wins, and to accept whatever life brings. As you can already see, this is exactly what is required of the main character in any good film or a book, and this is also what is required of us in our daily lives. David Goggins is currently known as an author and a speaker. He appeared multiple times on the Joe Rogan podcast, and his recent book has proven very popular, unlike many public speakers who sometimes have little real-life evidence to support their various claims. The curious case of David Goggins follows a very different path. In fact, his book and his online appearances are the least impressive part of his personal journey. Here are some facts about him that will shed light on the type of person he is and his attitude towards challenges. He held Guinness World Record for pull-ups, completing 4,030 in 17 hours. He has competed in multiple endurance races and has placed 3rd in the Badwater Death Valley race, considered the world's toughest race, a 135-mile course starting at 279 feet below sea level in the Badwater Basin in the California's Death Valley. He said the following: "Pain unlocks a secret doorway in the mind, one that leads to both peak performance and beautiful silence." So how is the life of David Goggins relevant to the discussion of the hero's journey? If the road of trials is a puzzle that once solved allows you to deal with any life problem, regardless of how painful and unpleasant it is, then David Goggins has solved the puzzle and is currently trying to actively tell the rest of us how to solve the puzzle too. It seems that he has figured out the secret to the mental process of seeing failure and challenge as the greatest weapon in the journey to personal success. In fact, he has even been a test subject at the previously mentioned Huberman lab. So what is the message that David Goggins is trying to share? I think it's best to hear it from David himself.
I was never breaking the soul of anything in front of me. So that's why I came up with this thing called Taking Souls in my book. I started to devise ways to break a soul of a human being, of an object, of whatever's in front of me. If you keep on attacking something, nothing wants to stand in front of anything. That's all you need. You need to look at someone's eyes. You know how it is when you fight somebody and you broke that motherfucker. He's like, "Oh God, man, I don't want to go back to the next round." And you feel like, "My God, I can fight all day. I can fight all day long." That's what taking souls is. But you have to have the will, the heart, the courage to go that distance when you're exactly jacked up. You have nothing left to give and give more. I learned how to control my adrenals. If you know how you get that fight or flight response when you get to move real quick.
Yeah.
And I started learning the mind a lot, how to get myself jacked I learned how to really find strength in the misery. When everybody's suffering, everybody's all poopy pants and their mentality's down and everything, I started just like, my God, this is where I shine. And I started using all that misery for tons and tons of drive and motivation to.
There is one more super inspirational story that should be explained in the context of overcoming obstacles and turning them into opportunities. While you may not be aware of who Milton Erickson was, you have surely heard about either NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, or hypnosis, or perhaps psychosocial genomics. These are all areas that he has directly or indirectly influenced, and none of that would be possible if not for a series of very unfortunate events in his early life. Milton was born in relative poverty as the second of 11 children. 2 of his siblings died in early childhood, but Erickson's early years were full of overwhelming difficulties at every step. Not only did he suffer from an undiagnosed dyslexia, tone deafness, but to top it all off, he was also colorblind. As if this number of obstacles was insufficient, as a result of polio, he was paralyzed as a young man. The only remaining bodily functions he had left at his disposal were seeing, hearing, and moving his eyes. In fact, his parents were told he would not survive, but he recovered over time. In this process of recovery, he relied on reliving his existing memories of micro muscle movements to bring him back to a functional state. Partial paralysis and the experience of severe sickness made a profound impact on young Erickson, and contrary to what you might expect, it is precisely that devastating period in his life that allowed him to develop deep insight into conscious and unconscious behaviors, hypnosis, and the human nature in general. Erickson went on to get a medical degree from the University of Wisconsin and an MA in psychology, and this was only the beginning of his lifelong journey. In his work, Erickson dedicated himself to the field of psychiatry, while his academic work initially sought to determine if there are any adverse effects of hypnosis for the subject. As a researcher, he focused on experiments that induced deafness or hallucinations or automatic handwriting. Honestly, the list of his credentials goes on, but the key takeaway is that he was incredibly qualified in the field and delivered creative and reliable results. While he suffered from the side effects of polio all his life, he turned this period of severe suffering and weakness into an opportunity that changed not only his life but also influenced generations of psychologists and thinkers. So now, if you can think of any other person who adopted a similar attitude to problems and difficulties, please comment below with their name, and if you have time, a brief background story. I love reading about inspiring people and their life lessons. Let's now turn back to the road of trials. In any plotline, the road of trials is the initial descent into the unknown. The hero will need to slowly immerse himself in the unpredictable adventureland, where he needs to develop skills and tools to be ready for the final challenge and to lay ground for the personal realization. Although the tests and trials, the building of alliances and the making of enemies make for a great film, most of us would likely wish to avoid this stage in our lives. Yet there is a valuable lesson that can be learned from the pattern of the hero's journey, and in particular from the tests and trials stage. The road of trials symbolizes the coming to being aware of oneself, the increasing mastery over oneself, as well as the ability to see reality more objectively, even if the experience of that objective viewing is quite painful. The roller coaster of the road of trials is an essential prerequisite that equips the hero with the knowledge and experience to face the ultimate challenge, whatever it may be. Without fully engaging with the process of learning and becoming, the hero has no hope in the final confrontation ahead. We will explore the many perspectives on the final challenge next week, and we will examine the 2 domains in which the ultimate challenge occurs. This is because in the final task, the hero has to face an external enemy as well as to overcome an internal difficulty of sorts at the same time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel if the hero's journey has caught your attention and it's something that you wish to learn more about. Comment below to let me know you're out there.